So yeah, I'm Shawn Sheehy. I do book things. As as Christina just mentioned, book artist and have been for 20 some years, and a book educator. And I've been an educator even longer. I was an educator first before I was as a book artist, and then as of 2018, the director of the Movable Book Society. So I'm going to be invariably sipping on tea here and coughing into my sleeve. So I'll try to be as graceful as possible and make this sound as fluid and comfortable as possible. We'll see how it goes. This is my first day back after canceling the last 11 days of my life, basically. So fingers crossed. So I'm going to start. Let's see if we can do this. We cannot, so we're going to skip that. I come by, book arts things because way back when I was in design school, we had a design challenge of basically just making a book, and we had the option of making any kinds of choices within some certain parameters. And I decided to solve the design problem by making a book. Let's take a look at that book. So Christina, if you can throw a spotlight onto my desktop.
Okay.
Done. Good. It's this. So, right away, you're going to see that it is falling apart. It is almost 25 years old, and and it's constructed of art papers that I've purchased in Madison, Wisconsin. It's all been laser printed, so it's barely better than a photocopier, and it's all assembled using rubber cement. So you can see that's all in there because that's how we used to do things in the design world way back. So the book is slowly eating itself. But I decided to make a book. I also decided to make a pop-up book. And what I wanted to do with this book was create this shape. And I wanted to use some nice art papers and laminate them to a translucent sheet, kind of a faux vellum here in this case. So there's some nice shine through from the back. But then also to engineer into this shape, the sound is not intentional, by the way. That's the rubber cement sticking to itself. Having that shape creates this kind of rolling sense as you're moving through the book. And that supports the idea of the book because it's a counting book. It's a counting on the Marsh is what I've called it. A nighttime book of numbers. And so I'm looking at a marsh ecosystem in this book. It's kind of where I first set my foot into making artist books about ecology, and I've kind of never gone away from that. But also kind of leaning heavily into my education background, where we use things like concept books, books of numbers, books of colors, books of letters, shapes, etc. And using a concept book as a way to structure content in a non-narrative way. So I've got these collection of animals in here. We have movement through time because we start with sunset and we end with full-on dark. Here on the 10th page, which is just got these herons. So aside from my first foray into paper engineering, it's not terribly complicated. It's utterly successful, structure-wise, not materials-wise. It's also the first time that I kind of wrapped my head around this idea of artist books being a way to work within the book form and communicate using text, to communicate using image, but also to communicate using structure, you know, letting them all have their own voice and all work together to tell a thing. So that's this first book. And it was kind of nicely well received. Got some nice feedback from it. And shortly after completing it, and I was at the end of my design program and wasn't quite sure what I was off to next. And someone who had their hands in lots of different things said to me, oh, there's this great place in Chicago that just opened, a school that just opened, a program, that's the most specific and accurate word, at the Center for Book Arts in Chicago. They now have a graduate program, and evidently they have an exhibit of pop-up books up right now. Let's go take a look at it. And so I bounced down from Madison and met my pal Leslie there, and we looked at pop-up books, and the then director of the program, Marilyn Sword, came, I would say, running out of her office. She was aggressively recruiting for this program because it was just starting. And basically, I was sold, and I applied to get into that program. And because of this book that I'm holding in front of you right now, I got a fellowship for that program, and it paid for my first year of graduate school, which was amazing. So, you know, the nice thing about going to school to study artist books, there's a lot of deep thinking into how artist books are made and what they do and how they do it, but also, you know, some very real serious studio experiences. So hand paper making classes, letterpress printing classes, bookbinding classes, and then lots of concepting and thinking classes too, which is great. And then there were not any paper engineering classes in this program. For those of you, I know some of you know Carol Barton, or at least know her by name. She came and did a little workshop with us once. Haiti Kyle came and did a little workshop. Not necessarily a paper engineer per se, or a pop-up person per se, but a paper engineer for sure. So, you know, little tiny nuggets of expertise, but by and large, paper engineering instruction is utterly autodidactic outside of now the context of workshop instruction, which is great. There's a lot more workshop instruction in paper engineering, and I am working hard to keep expanding that. So during grad school, spent a lot of time building other book arts skills, and I decided for one of my classes I wanted to revisit this Marsh book and kind of, you know, do it right. And what you are looking at right now is an artist proof. So and it's ancient, so it's looking a little shabby, but you can see the shape of it is very different. It's much more elegant. It is much more, yeah, elegant. It's a nicer looking shape for a book. I did this thing that I then pursued for a couple of books, which was to hand cast the covers. So the covers this book are they're just cotton rag, 100% cotton rag, and you know, and I pressed them, so they're about 1/8 of an inch thick. Did a quarter binding with cloth and thought it would be fun to put a burned edge on there to make it feel a little more organic. But otherwise, the book, that's the back. The book is made entirely of handmade paper. It's all letterpress printed. A lot of the printing has been done from polymer plates. And then you're immediately going to see again that shape. And in this case, we're now sticky, not because of rubber cement, but because of really heavy ink handling that's been sitting there for 20 years. Moving away from paper cutting to printing to make the production a little more efficient. The textile remained exactly the same. I still kind of played with this idea of pressing different kinds of image into the base here. Like here's some little deer prints down here. I don't know if you can see them because they're subtle. Same set of creatures, but just very satisfying to revisit this project and to do it right, to edition it. So there's lots of copies of this out. Well, a dozen copies of this out in the world. And so it was my first edition book. And it's really all the paper engineering that I did when I was in graduate school, because there's no time. But as soon as I left, I immediately jumped into my first project, which I called Welcome to the Neighborhood. And again, like I mentioned, I used these cast cotton covers. They're even a little thicker in this round. They're absolutely beefy. It's again all made entirely of handmade paper. It's also letterpress printed. You're again looking at an ancient artist proof, so it's a tiny bit ragged, but you get the idea. And so again, thinking about ecology, and what I wanted to do with this book, Welcome to the Neighborhood, a pop-up book of animal architecture, was to think about making and on kind of a meta level, because here's me as a maker making a book, and I wanted to pull out animals who are makers, primarily who make their home, and and then think about them in terms of community. So all of the creatures that are in this book, they interact, they have relationships within the community. It is again a concept book in that there is no narrative that pulls you through, but instead it's written in rhymed couplets, and it's a little bit of a guessing game. I give some clues in the second verse on each page as to what's coming up on the next page, and the reader needs to guess what that next creature is. And I kind of lean into that as another device to help to propel a reader through the experience, given that there's no dramatic tension.
I would say that there's plenty of dramatic tension.
In a non-narrative way. Yeah. So it's again editioned. My first big one out of graduate school. I think there were also 10 or 12 copies of this one. Super fun, super successful. Pretty much done single-handedly. Hired a little bit of X-Acto help, but otherwise it was all me. And while I make books, I listen to lots of audio, and at this point we're still enough in the deep history that podcasts weren't invented yet. So I'm mostly listening to talk radio and recorded books that I'm borrowing from the library. And while I was building the last one, I listened to a great book by Richard Leakey that is simply called The Sixth Extinction, and was really taken by this idea of the sixth extinction, and that it refers to a current point in geologic time right now where In the past, there have been these 5 great extinction events, like the meteor that killed off the dinosaurs. And that now we're in the 6th, and it's because of people that we have some unprecedented species lost. So that's grim. And as a generally optimistic person who, in choosing an idea for a book, needs to be able to work on something that's not going to be depressing for the next 4 years. So I'm like, okay, so that's what's now. What's beyond that? What's around the corner? And so that's what this book is and does. Kind of trace out those first 5 events here. And then I have again settled on a system, an ecosystem. So all the creatures in this book conceivably can interreact. They share resources and space. And so, doing some research, doing some thinking, what are these creatures that we anticipate are, indestructible? Roaches, they can survive a nuclear explosion. They have that reputation, and as far as I know, it's true. So who's going to survive? And then project enough into the future that there'd be some time and space for some evolution. And what are these things going to become? So that's what you are seeing here. Something that's really strongly based on current biological fact and leans heavily on biological fact, but pushes into some fiction. So again, it's a concept book. The text is written as a field guide, all tucked into these side panels, kind of tuck away conveniently. And the creatures in this book are sequenced from the least amount of evolutionary change to the most amount of evolutionary change. So here's some shelf fungus that are sort of recalibrated themselves. A catfish, a broken mechanism of a bug based on a pill bug or a sow bug, a pigeon version, skipping. One of my favorite in this book is the thing that I call a snapdragon, which did not make it into what I'm going to show you next, which is the trade versions of these 2 books that I just showed you. Because I thought it was fun. I'm making stuff up. I'm making up a lot of stuff. And I'm making up the Latin for genus and species as well. And that's fun. But it felt amusing to me to think there's this creature that in our era is a snapping turtle. And it's becoming faster, it's becoming larger, it's getting a long neck, it's starting to look like a dragon. And so if we take snapping turtle and dragon, when we sort of, collide those words, we get snapdragon. And I thought, oh, this is fun too. It's a kind of way to talk about how language changes and evolves over time as well. But Candlewick would not have it. And they probably made the right choice. And then here's the last creature in this one, the road trap, which are Doctor Who-ish, I think. And I love these little guys. So I'm gonna pull over the two trade books here. Somewhere in the early 2010s, I think, 2011, 2012, something like that, maybe. I had some pals here in Chicago that went to, I think it was the New York Book Fair, and they offered to take Neighborhood with them and shop it around a little bit. And they came in touch with Candlewick, who's right there by all of you in right there in Boston, and Candlewick went for it. So they loved the handmade paper in it. They loved that surface. They really wanted to capture the feel of handmade paper, even though it wasn't going to feel like handmade paper, but capturing the texture as much as possible. This is a different introduction than my artist book version, but for the most part, they really kept pretty faithfully to the original art. The text all got completely rewritten. As I mentioned, it was written in rhyming couplets, and they said, that's too janky. Shawn, you need to make that not janky anymore. So do something smarter and less rhythmic. So I did, and it's very plain spoken. The intent was to get some fairly serious scientific ideas down on the page, and my word count was tiny. So yeah, plain spoken was the solution. You can see it's a little bigger than the artist book version. It's a little flatter. There's one less spread. The mole didn't make it into this one. But they really did a terrific job, both in producing it, and I'm going to skip to the end, and making it more dramatic, and it was a very satisfying project. Candlewick the folks there are lovely to work with. They are lovely to work with, and I would do it again at any time. But we did run right from Neighborhood into Sixth Extinction, and here's what that one looks like in a trade version. Both of these two, incidentally, a little bit of a rude self-promotional commercial, are still available. Order them at your local private bookstore.
I'm going to be sharing some of those tabs in my intake.
Okay.
Definitely. Yeah.
Or if it's Amazon, do what you need to do. So this really got big. It is the largest by scale pop-up book that I have in this room. They hired Jordi Solano, that's his name that you see down here, to do the illustration, which is exquisite. He was lovely to work with. And they really wanted to expand the story of this. It's moving more into world building, really, I guess is the best way to think about it. It's still non-narrative, but just really setting the scene and setting a tone and getting the idea of the science here, and then just getting massive with the structure. And then each pop-up page, which is going to look really close to what you saw in the artist book version, is followed by a page that is pure illustration and copy, just to dive into what's going on with each of these animals. There are those clams again. Atmospheric clam illustrations. Let's jump to Petey Bug. As you might recall, that's the one that was broken in the previous version, and it got really fundamentally re-engineered so that it would not be quite so fragile, much more robust in this version. And it's just as good. It's just as good. I think the bloom worm here too, which kind of needed a little bit of extra oomph. So this big sculptural flower got added into this page as well. And then the road trap at the end, to make it more to make it better reflect the copy, they got stuck up on a wall, because in the copy I kind of talk about the fact that they live on the wall. That was a fun re-engineering as well. So not as successful a new baby gift as the first book was, but you know, my sister still does it. She sends these out as baby gifts all the time. She has unusual friends. I'm gonna take a short pivot out of my own bookmaking and just quick share with you a project that was my involvement is purely in the binding. So it's a commercial text block of Neil Gaiman's Neverwhere, which is a book that I love. And this was all connected to we in Chicago here, we do what we call the One Book, One Chicago. I think there are a number of cities who do it, and Boston might well be one, too. And so, you know, they get lots of copies of it and they encourage lots of people to read it and talk about it. And then after 10 years of the One Book, One Chicago program, they had a binding competition. And you know, and folks could just go crazy. So here was my entry. And the story of Neverwhere features prominently a character who is able to create doors into, you know, non-tangential spaces. So I thought it would be fun to put doors, and her name is Door as well. The character's name is Door. And to put doors into the covers, and then to have them be doors that you can open. And then of course, because this is what I do, you know, have little pop-ups behind those doors in the covers. A little rook, a little rat. And then it's also the aesthetic of the book is kind of under the street, kind of grit and gutter. And so it's kind of pulling that aesthetic into the general binding as well.
Can you show how thick the covered pages
Sure.
actually are to accommodate that? Yeah, nice.
This is about the same time that I went from being an apartment person to a house person. That's where I am right now. And so I started working on this series. And it's also at a point where I was really trying to be more thoughtful about integrating my workshop life with my artist book life and pulling some of the structures of my artist book life into workshop life. So beginning here with a book that I call a Pop-Up Field Guide to North American Wildflowers. So it's again a collection. And I have these series of wildflowers. And still, if you take a wildflower class with me, the next one will be at the Phipps Conservatory in Philadelphia, I believe coming up next month. That's more commercializing on you. There won't be exactly these flowers. There's a lot of them right now. But building these structures, having them be workshop structures, but also then organizing them into a book and building text to support the structure. And in this case, I wanted to look at the Victorian idea of the language of flowers and how a flower can communicate a specific message and bring that into our century by thinking of new things that these plants can communicate. And then that all becomes an essay that is tagged on here at the very end. And I did this terrible thing by thinking of this as a series and having the first one finished and thinking, all right, it's a series, there needs to be more. So the second is this book, which I call a pop-up culinary herbal. And again, kind of leaning into some more historical lore, thinking of this idea of the culinary herbal and how earlier scientists and physicians, medicine people talked about using food as medicine and what you could cure by having someone eat a radish, for example. And so in my version, I'm looking at vegetables. I'm really enjoying the process of turning vegetables into attractive engineered objects, especially having just done the flowers, which are kind of easy to think about as being pretty structured. And a cauliflower example is lumpy, and it's not so easy to see that as being beautiful structure, but that was the fun challenge here. Again, each page has a little subfolio that talks about the vegetable, and then also suggests ways that these vegetables cannot cure bodily ills, but instead that they could cure societal ills. Ends with the potato. Then to complete the series, I kind of avoided this idea for a super long time, but I thought I really need to kind of go for it. And so looked into lore that surrounds plants of the winter holidays. So, you know, think about poinsettias and holly. And, you know, it's useful lore. It's been around for a super long time. And it was fun for me to try to make this the most reductive holiday book as possible. And so the palette is really narrow. There's only like, I think 8 colors in the book overall. Each page is written in haiku, so text is reduced. And so looking at holiday plants and kind of thinking in amusing ways about the lore of those plants. So like in this case, here's mistletoe, and the text reads, "Look, there's mistletoe. Its name means poop on a stick. Come on, dear, kiss me." And this is true. That's what that name means, because of the way mistletoe tries to keep its sticky, gooey seeds up in the branches of oak trees because it's parasitic, and if it falls to the ground, it dies. So it needs to be sticky. And what a hilarious thing to kiss under. Funny thing about poppies and their good fortune, but also how they can give you a bad drug test. Result, dipping down into Australia, involving some holiday bells there. And then one of my greatest personal victories, getting to the end of this book and looking at the Oaxacan Radish Festival. So you got this big old radish, and the book is about, you know, cut plants, fresh cut plants, but reductive cutting, and then locating this plant in Mexico and thinking in terms of Spanish, and using this very reductive way to say Christmas, but getting a little space in there. And if we think of X as being a symbol for the word cut, and of course mas is more, and so our radish says Xmas, but it also says cut more. That's where I burnt off, and I haven't hit that peak again ever since. All right, so that's the end of that series. I'm checking the clock. I've got just a few more things that I want to show you. I have two more, and then we'll get to some of Christina's topics. Because for one, Christina really kind of led this whole conversation about this A to Z collection that was published by the Movable Book Society in 2018, in time for its 25th anniversary. And this is the Society's 3rd published book, and I'll throw some scare quotes around that, because it is not a conventional codex, but instead it's a box of individual folios, and it's an ABC book. So every letter has its own card. And it was a project that was organized from a contest. Monica Brandrup, who is at the Up With Paper Company, was a primary player here. Also, Up With Paper basically served as the producer for this project, and they also warehoused it and were in charge of domestic distribution up until just last month. So just they were really valuable, and we are very grateful for what they did in working on this project. But have all of these folks, engineers from around the world, really, who contributed.
Would you like to share one of the backs of the card, a single card, so they can see what the backside of a card looks like?
The backside, you got it.
Yeah.
Dorothy. Yeah, so information about the engineer, some rationale about why they chose the letter that they chose. It's a terrific collection. They it's just so representative of kind of what's going on in the pop-up world right now. They're really beautifully produced. Eugene Kim, also art director at Up With Paper. She's got a number of trade books out published through Up With Paper. She's really good. She's really good. Here's W, which you might have seen in the promotion for this afternoon, because that one's me playing around with waves. There's a little sticky moment. There we go. And trying to render waves in the layer of that W. There were some really tight constraints around production for this to keep it affordable. We were allowed only a certain number of glue points, any position where glue was holding two things together. And so even with all the sophistication of these things that you see here, they're very much streamlined for production. And like I mentioned earlier, in 2018, I took over a role as the director of the Movable Book Society. So some of my focus has been going towards admin. Also, the pandemic showed up not long after that. And like with lots of us, it really created a lot of interesting change in my life. And my workshop side exploded in all of the best ways. So working on new artist book projects for me, it hasn't really happened since 2018, though I am very, very eager to return to it. And I will have that figured out by next year, I'm confident. But one of the new things that's been fun for me to think about, both in terms of my own work, but also as workshop material, is the idea of a box as a container for a pop-up. So rather than it being a single folio, a single card that closes completely flat, playing around with what would be the advantage and possible disadvantage of working into a box where it doesn't have to go completely flat, and what sort of engineering possibilities might be there. I love this little rhino at the end of this one. I'm going to pull that one out. I'm also right now super interested in finding some novel ways to create a sense of animation in a pop-up. So in this one, having this mechanism in the back that has that bird swooping through space. I love how the rhino's head kind of whirls around and bounces up. Trying to make that engineering feel as energetic and as dramatic as possible. Attention getting, and also just fun. All right, Christina, I'm gonna pause. I'm gonna take a sip of my tea. I'm gonna let you pull out your list.
Okay. Wow, you have been a trooper with your sore throat and cough. We appreciate you not canceling and persevering through such a lovely presentation. Excellent. Yeah, so basically, I wanted to start basically with everybody understanding that just ShawnSheehy.com is your source for all the wonderful, amazing things about Shawn. I do have a couple of questions. While I'm poking around here, can you explain a little bit more about the Megan Dorfer Prize, which you were awarded in 2016 for Welcome to the Neighborhood? That's part of the Movable Book Society's structure, right?
Yes, it is exclusively the terrain of the society. In conjunction with each biennial conference, we peruse the books that have been published over the past 22 years, rather. And the board of the society culls that set, reduces it to maybe 10, and then our membership has the opportunity to select their favorite. So it's best engineering for a trade pop-up book. There are a couple of other things involved for sure.
Yeah.
So sometimes having really good harmony, as I was mentioning earlier, this idea of fusing illustration, text, and structure, even if the engineering isn't necessarily quite as sophisticated as a Matthew Reinhardt book, for example. Some of you might be familiar with his very complex engineering. There's some latitude in there.
Yeah. Yeah, so you've got a couple really nice videos on here explaining this project, which I thought was lovely. You have a really great YouTube channel. NEBA is working on developing our NEBA YouTube channel as well. And this video today, once it gets edited, will be on our website as well for that. The Best Pop-Up Books Ever did a nice interview with you about the 6th extinction here. So that's another good site to take a peek at. They are available, as you mentioned, on Amazon, but there's some other places that are pretty much at the same price, right? They're more or less the retail price is the same. So I would personally support somebody other than Amazon if you're interested in purchasing it. At the Newberry, which is in Chicago as well, can you explain this series and how you did this little takeaway? They're mentioning it in this, but they don't give us a picture.
Yeah, because it's too fresh. It's too hot.
It's too hot and fresh to be shared yet. Oh, okay.
They're not ready to reveal yet. Yeah. But for sure, let's talk about this for a quick second. This show, it's opening on March 21st, curated by Suzanne Carr-Schmidt at the Newberry. For those of you who track with the society at all, she was our keynote speaker in 2021. She's a historian of paper engineered books, and she's put together a little show. What you see here, of course, is a Robert Sabuda mechanism that's part of one of the society's published anniversary books, our 10th anniversary book. But they hired me and a local illustrator, engineer, fancy pants, art folk person, Hannah Batzel. Track this person, everybody. Hannah Batzel, she will rock your world. Batsel. So she and I made this little thing that is going to be an exhibit make and take. So you visit the exhibit and then you pick up one of these things and you take it home and you build it, and it's going to be super fun.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think I'm going to make a point of getting there to spend a little time. I've never been to Chicago before, so I think I'll try to time it during this show because this looks fascinating. Yeah. So you're also, obviously, you're a great Instagrammer as well, with lots of do-it-yourself projects and more videos there, and lots of good things to keep up with. NEBA has an upcoming, my little bars here keep getting hidden by things. We have the Posted with Love NEBA Valentine's Day card swap. I'm doing a pop-up. I'm not doing a very complicated pop-up, but with lots of marbling with suggestive body parts and stuff, jumping around. But in case you're interested, he's got a couple of really great classes. They're not going to be at the time in time for you to get your pop-up done necessarily for the exchange, but if you're really interested, he's got some really great online workshops specifically relating to Valentine's coming up, which I think will be great. As you can see here, this one is at the Kalamazoo Center, Book Art Center, which will be fun. Tell us a little bit about FIPS and your connection with finding venues that have this ecological kind of tie-in to what you're interested in.
There's a guy who teaches illustration at FIPS. His name is Weldon Duran, and he was attracted to one of my classes a couple of years ago during the pandemic, and so he made that connection for me and FIPS. Though indeed I had already been teaching classes with the Chicago Botanic Garden and the Denver Botanical Garden as well. Yeah. So familiar territory. In those two places, I did it on site because it was back in the old days. With FIPS, it's all just been online. But we did a series of 3 last year. We're going to do a series of 3 this year. Each of the sessions is pretty short. It's just 1 day, short for me. I tend to do long classes. Yeah. But yeah, it's been lovely. They're lovely people.
I think given the founding of NEBA being based on basically self-agency and us, the 4 founders coming together because of a lack of places to show, welcoming environments, that we felt like we needed more book arts in the Boston area, especially, but all throughout New England, and just really kind of centering your thoughts on how can you target less traditional venues and thinking about expanding these ideas. So I kind of really enjoyed seeing the diversity of the places that you teach at is just really kind of nice. So I was appreciating that a lot too.
Sure.
This is your pop-up cabinet that you just ended with here, yep. Right? Yep. Yep. So this is coming, this is a ways off, and it's a little bit more of a lengthy class, right? Is it more than one? It's 2 days, a 2 day session. Yeah. I think that's a really unusual structure that might be something a lot of our members would be interested in. Yeah, definitely. And the last one I had was the this Newport festival that's coming up. There's not a whole lot listed, but you're one of their instructors that they're already talking about. So tell us a little bit more about this festival. It's in Oregon, right?
Yeah, I actually like everyone else, the information is coming down.
It's not quite there yet.
So okay. We'll find out next week. But indeed,
is it the first year that they've done this festival, or is it an ongoing festival?
It's ongoing, yeah. But okay. I don't know when it started.
Yeah,
but Newport, as you can see by the corner there, it's on the Oregon coast. So you would fly into Portland. It is an on-site festival, so you can get yourself out to the Oregon coast for a couple of days, for 3 days. There's going to be a ton of instruction by other great people who I don't know yet.
Yeah. So we're a little ahead of the curve on this one. Yeah.
Ahead of the curve. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good to promote it. Yeah.
Definitely. Wow, you've got a lot going on. So I'm going to keep an eye on your website and your Instagram page to get to know all the latest and greatest news.
Thank you, Christine.
Definitely a fan, and I'm gonna look forward to taking some of these online workshops.
And let me quick circle back to Marie's request to mention the conference, the Movable Book Society, which is an organization of pop-up book collectors and makers and conservators and librarians and historians and academics. At the last weekend of September, we're meeting in Cleveland this year. It's going to be good. It's Central-ish It's certainly central between Boston and Chicago. And it's going to be just, Cleveland's got lots of really good stuff, and it's a very affordable city. I don't know why we haven't made this choice earlier than now, but we're really excited. Case Western has a great artist book collection. Looking forward to seeing that. There's a children's illustration museum that's not too far out of Cleveland. We're going to go visit that.
Yeah.
It's going to be good. It's going to be good.
Awesome. Let's open it up to some Q&A. You can throw it in the chat, or you can just I've turned everybody off. You can turn your volume on and just come right out and hit Shawn with some questions. While you guys are getting organized, I have a couple of my own. How do you balance the needs of the notion of hitting adults versus children for this content? I know that pop-up books in most people's minds are children's books, but you've got a little bit of more sophisticated content with the 6th extinction there. So I'm just curious, how do you balance that?
Christina, I'm also going to quick note at 4:10 is I got a scoot time.
Oh no, okay, cool. So everybody get your questions quick. Yeah.
And I'll try not to choke my way through these last 8 minutes. So yeah, for sure, pop-ups live in the world of novelty publishing, on the trade level for sure. And lots of book artists are incorporating paper engineered structure, and are not feeling compelled to keep their content within youth genre. So it's a little bit of a challenge. And quite frankly, I don't know how Candlewick ever got a green light for publishing the 6th extinction, but they did, and I'm grateful. And there's lots of adult pop-up books that are out there too. What's that scary? Oh, Stranger Things. There's a new pop-up book about Stranger Things.
Yes, we spoke with Simon
a while
back.
Right?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
There's a book about the Walking Dead, one of those zombie books, and it's grisly. It is not a child's.
I've had people concerned when I give the pop-up book of phobias as a baby book to the family, but they always come back and say, it's a big hit.
Yeah.
They're always surprised because it can be a little aggressive in some areas. Yeah.
So I think in a very real way that the genre is expanding, and there's a lot that's happening right now on both the artist book level and the trade level that's pushing the form into more adult consumption, and it's all good.
Yeah. I'm also noticing, I remember when we first spoke a couple weeks ago, I had said that it was a male dominant, had seemed to be such a male dominant area, paper engineering in general. I'm noticing now that I've really had a chance to interface with the A to Z collection of cards, that it's a lot of women in that set. There's a lot of Asian people as well. Which, have you done any work or gone to Tokyo or any of these places like in Asia to do any promotion or work with your books?
I have not been to the East. You are absolutely right. There is a lot going on over there.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, most of current trade production is happening in China or Southeast Asia, Laos, Thailand, Sri Lanka. But yeah, for sure, in the 20th century, pop-ups were all about the dudes, and that is not the case anymore. As you all know, there are lots of women in artist books who are using paper engineering, and that's predominant. And in the trade book world, lots of the new folks, lots of the the up and comers, they're all women. So it's good. Yeah. There's a lot of diversity coming in.
Yeah.
We'll love to see if we get some. I was going to say that for me, the thing about pop-up books is that they delight. It's all, whenever you open it, it's going to be like some wonderful surprise, even if it's a scary surprise. And it makes me feel like a kid, the excitement of, oh, what am I going to see next? So
Mhm.
I think that's why they're so, and their enduring popularity. I think that explains part of it, at least.
Yeah,
Agreed.
definitely, definitely. Awesome. Well, what a privilege to have you here. We're super excited. I'm going to let him choose one of our wonderful zine collection sets to go in the mail, and we're super excited. I'm going to be getting that post up so that everybody can take a look at this year's swap in detail. And hopefully one day we'll be able to meet in person.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you, Susan, for the comment about the newsletter as well. The society does a quarterly newsletter. Lots of good stuff in there. Yeah.
There really is. I don't get the actual print version, but it's even in the digital format. It's fantastic. Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, we hope you get better soon. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for everyone for coming. We've been getting bigger and bigger turnouts for our Zoom meetings, so that pleases us greatly.
Yeah.
Happy New Year, and go take a lozenge, little lozenger.
Right.
Okay, thanks everyone. We look forward to seeing you at the next time.
Bravo.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. This is great.